I'm gonna be real, y'all. I never watched Dragon Ball or Naruto or whatever that teleport thing is from. So, Demon Slayer, eh. Check out that fourth season. That was pretty sick, right? All right, anyways, what's going on, YouTube? Welcome back to another episode of Helldivers 2. Well, kind of an episode of Helldivers 2. So today I want to actually go over how I got Helldivers 2 to run at a decent frame rate. So basically I'm just kind of trying to optimize Helldivers 2, and I spent a lot of time trying to optimize it and get it running at a decent rate. And I feel like there's kind of a lot of information around that's kind of spread throughout the internet looking for the best way to optimize your games, So I decided, why not make one specifically for Helldivers where everything is just kind of consolidated into one video, and we can try to get everybody running a good experience for Helldivers 2. First thing I want to do is I want to go over what my system specs are currently. Go over what my system specs are. So first, I have a Ryzen 5 3600 6-core processor with 6 virtual cores, and I also have 64 gigabytes of RAM, and I also have GTX 1080 8 gigabytes of RAM, or 8 gigabytes of VRAM. Those are just kind of the base system specs that everyone looks for. GTX 1080, 64 gigabytes of RAM, Ryzen 5 3600, 12 core processor. And the first thing that I always do whenever I'm having issues with any kind of frame issues is I will open up GeForce Experience. And here I just check that I have the latest game ready driver. As you can see, I do here, version 560.7. What I also do is, if you right click down here on nvidia control panel, you'll get this opened up. Now this isn't going to make the hugest like 10 to 90 fps, but I did notice it's a little bit of a better performance upgrade, maybe 1 to 2 fps. Over here under adjust image settings with preview, I make by default it's the let the 3D application decide. I changed mine over to use my preference emphasizing performance. So just drag the slider all the way down to the left. This is something that it's a minuscule difference you'll see if you really zoom in. I can't even zoom in that much, but there's essentially just more jagged lines along the image preview. So it's a small difference. That's one thing that I changed. There are some other things that you could change here, but for the most part, I kept these all the same. One other thing that I trying to get this game to run better, I got a program called lossless scaling. This is a program that is about $7 on Steam right now. And essentially what it does is, it's a little bit confusing because the reviews will say that you're basically downloading FPS. You kind of are, you kind of aren't. Essentially it'll make it so that if you're playing at 30 FPS, you can double that frame rate, where it'll use some kind of algorithm to draw the frames in between every other frame. So it'll essentially, you could have 30 frames, but if you double it, you can make it look like 60. You're still technically getting 30 frames, and your inputs will still reflect those 30 frames, but it will look more appealing on your screen as if you're getting 60 frames. That is one thing that I will always have open whenever I'm recording or even playing Helldivers 2. If you're interested in, if you're still having low frame rate issues, then I would recommend getting lossless scaling. And this is all the settings that I use for lossless scaling. Over here on the left, I'll have scaling mode set to auto, aspect ratio for the aspect ratio. Scaling type is off because if you change this, then it might just cause some weird frame rate issues. Frame generation, LSFG 2.2. There's 2 different versions that they released, and 2.2 is just the better one. Mode is X2 because if I'm getting 30 frames, so then it'll make it look like 60 frames. But if I'm getting 15 frames, it'll look like 30. I could do X3, but with X3 you'll get a lot of that artifacting where it kind of looks like you'll see the smudges and blurs when you try to artificially create more frames. So I'd like to keep it at X2. Performance is ticked to on, and you can copy my settings down here, but for the most part everything is the default. So that is what I use. And then I'll also set, this button is our scale button. So basically it's just the button that activates it. I set a shortcut key to be Shift F2 so that whenever I'm in game, I can just hit Shift F2 and it'll turn on. All right, so I got the game open here, and you can see my FPS over there in the top left. And the first thing that I want to do is actually just want to load into a quick game. So I'm going to start by joining a level 1 mission, and it's just going to, this is purely just for benchmarking purposes, just so I can kind of load everything up and get into a map. But I will say that the performance does entirely depend on the map that you're currently on or the planet that you're on in this game. It shouldn't be the way it is, but that is the way it is. So just note that sometimes your performance will vary depending on what planet you're on. Now, this is one thing that I want to note is that the lower the difficulty, the higher the FPS. This is something that doesn't really be talked about in a lot of like frame comparison videos or like performance comparison videos. People will always be on level 1 or 2, and then they'll say like, oh look, my freaking 960 is getting 100 FPS on frame 1, so yeah, I can run this game. No, it can't. The difference between level 1 and level 9 difficulties is a huge 50 to even 60 FPS difference. What's up, y'all? Okay, sorry, editing Jake here. So I just wanted to come in here and just skip out all the nonsense. I was yapping like mad there. Okay, at the end there, I was yapping for like an hour, showing every single little setting and what every single setting does. And now that I'm 4 hours later, I got clear mind and I'm realizing that was stupid. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to link a video right here. This video goes really high detail into depth by benchmarking about every single setting, what every single setting does, and how it affects a game, and how the performance is impacted by each setting. If you're interested in that, check out that. What I'm going to be doing for this video though is showing you my exact settings and the frame rate that I'm getting with those settings, and I'm also going to show a couple things that he didn't mention in his video. So first off, in my GeForce experience over here, if you go down to the bottom right, and well, usually it's there. I think I slipped my computer or something. I don't know what happened. But yeah, if you open up GeForce Experience, you can go over to the settings tab, go over to general on the left here, and then if you scroll down to image scaling, this is something that I do. I'd be entirely sure what's going on with it. This is actually something that I just turned on, but I turned on render resolution up to 85% and then sharpen down to 0. I'm not entirely sure if this is affecting my performance, but okay, so I went ahead and did a little bit of research here, and feel free to leave a comment and let me know if I'm saying this wrong. But essentially what it seems like is image scaling is it will take, at least for NVIDIA cards, it will take an image that you're seeing currently in game, and then it'll just like upscale the resolution of that image. So for example, I was playing at ultra quality or quality resolution display scale, render scale. So it took that image and then it upscaled at 85%. And that is basically what it does for NVIDIA cards. I believe AMD cards have something similar called the AMD Fidelity FX Super Resolution, or FSR. So if you're using an AMD card, go ahead and try that out. But yeah, this seems like it's something pretty cool that it can essentially make your game look native at it, like its render scale is native, but you're playing at like performance or even less. So I highly recommend turning this on if you need some extra frames. I did just get through a jungle mission. Usually in jungle missions, I get barely 30 to 50 FPS. But this time I was getting like a very consistent 50 to 60. So make sure image scaling is turned on. Make sure in-game overlay is turned off. I've heard a lot of issues of people saying that their in-game overlay was causing a huge FPS drop. I did notice that I am getting a pretty good performance boost on that. And as for the settings that I am using, I am setting my display. Render scale is ultra quality. Resolution is my native resolution that I'm currently like playing on a monitor for, 1920 by 1080. Frame rate limit is off. Under my graphics, I'm just going to run through these settings. I'm going to give like a kind of a brief explanation of what they do, but overall I'm just going to say that this is the setting that I have, and this is the like performance that I'm getting. First off, motion blur, set that to 0. Nobody needs motion blur. It just kind of makes your game look muddy and unappealing. It can look good, but it can also cause a performance impact. It doesn't cause a huge performance impact in this game, but it still doesn't look good. Depth of field is off. Your eyes do this naturally. You don't need depth of field. It just blurs the vision around your like center reticle, so it's unnecessary. Your eyes do that on their own. Bloom I turn on because it makes the game look beautiful, or not beautiful, but it makes it add a little bit of cinematics, like that blue light in front of me. Sharpness I set up to 1 because when your display is set to anything less than native, then it could cause some blurry images results. Texture quality I set to high because at ultra I could theoretically run this at ultra, but I like to keep it at high just to try to keep it relatively in line with my 8GB graphics card. As mentioned over here on the right, I have high, so I keep it at 8GB. Object detail quality is basically that pop-in effect that you might hear people talk about, where essentially if you're far away from an object, then it has like a 0 level of detail, or like 1 level of detail, where it just kind of looks like a plain cube, and then as you get closer to it, it looks like a defined rock. I keep this on high, not a huge impact in performance. Render distance is set to ultra because, again, also no huge impact on performance, as well as having the ability to see enemies from a far distance helps a ton in group gameplay or in gameplay in general, and also just seeing the environment from far away helps a lot. Shadow quality I set to medium because when it's on the lowest, there's no shadows at all, or not no shadows at all, but it's very, very minuscule shadows. Low is just like really ugly Minecraft level of shadows. Ultra can cause a huge performance impact and like drop your frames about 10 to 15, so I like to keep it at medium where you can still see a shadow and it looks pretty decent, but you're not looking like you're playing a PS1 shadow. Particle quality, I like to set this to medium because this is what, when you have your lowest frame rate or your lowest graphics settings, you know, it'll be like squares, or whenever you shoot like an incendiary shotgun or you see fire in the distance, it'll just be little orange squares kind of floating in the distance. Set this to medium to get rid of that and get a decent looking particles. If you set it to high, you do experience a performance impact. Reflection quality, I set this to low because on lowest there is no reflections at all in the water, which can kind of make the game just look really poor and make it look like it's just a flat land water space. But if you set it to the highest, then it will cause a big performance impact, as well as some issues with the rendering of the reflections, where it'll essentially kind of render an outline around your body if you're looking at the water, and then it'll create this weird reflection where the reflection is going around your outline of your body. It doesn't look good. It's not very good, and there's not much of a difference between medium and high. There is a difference between low and medium, but it's not noticeable enough to where it matters enough. Space quality set to low. This is something that is hugely unnecessary. It'll add a slight better detail in the sky when you're in some missions. It's keyword on some missions, because 90% of missions you're going to be playing are have clouds on them anyway. So keep that on low. Ambient occlusion, it just adds like small shadows in the objects. So like if there's a light hitting a cliff, if it hits this, then it casts a shadow down there. Ambient occlusion will enable that shadow. Turning it on shows it, turning it off just makes it flat. It can create a little bit more depth in the game, and it can make the game look a lot prettier than before. Screen space global illumination, this is what essentially makes the light bounce inside of the ship or inside of, you know, wherever you are, and kind of like bounce off of different areas. So it'll create like these light rays that bounce everywhere. It can create a better look of light, but it does cause a huge impact in performance, so I keep that turned off. Vegetation and rubble density, this will create like more grass particles, more rocks, more sand, more dirt, anything like that. It'll create more of that in the environment, and it will kind of give the environment more of a lifelike feel. I like to keep this on high because it's not a huge performance impact, but it is not totally necessary to keep it on ultra because the difference is negligible and the performance impact is noticeable. Terrain quality, I keep that on medium. Essentially that is kind of the bump map of the terrain. So you could say that if you're in a flat area, you set this to low, it'll be flat. If you set this to high, it'll show the actual like ridges and dirt and the actual physical geometry of the dirt that you're standing on. So I like to keep this on medium. Medium impact on performance. High is a little bit too high of an impact on performance for my liking, so I keep that on medium. Volumetric fog quality, totally unnecessary. It can cause a huge impact on performance, as with most games. So, and this is just the kind of the resolution of the fog that is floating around the map. It can either be low resolution where it looks a little bit blocky with rough edges, or it could be very smooth with smooth edges, but a huge impact on performance, so I keep that on low. Volumetric clouds, this is the same thing, but the clouds in the sky, and that can cause, having this on high can cause a huge impact on performance, but even on lowest it looks virtually exactly the same, with a huge save on graphics and VRAM and all that. Lighting quality, I set this to low. Essentially this is actually pretty noticeable in the ship here. You can see here this is it on low, but if I set the graphics lighting quality to high, you can see that there's just the lights will just kind of show from further in the distance, and it can cast a little bit better shadows, a little bit better lighting touching from this light, where this light's coming from, like those light bars are kind of touching those areas way off in the distance. It looks good, it looks okay, but it's not worth the performance impact, so I'll keep this on low. Anti-aliasing is a personal preference. It can just cause jagged edges on objects that are kind of far away. So if you can see that ship in the distance, when I turn, the edges really kind of like, they kind of flicker off and on. There's no straight down edges. And if you were to turn that on, then it would work to try to get rid of that. You can see it there, it looks a lot more smoother, and everything's just kind of staying consistent. But this can also cause a pretty big performance impact, about 5 frames, so I'm going to keep that off. And use async compute. It's either going to be no or yes. This is entirely dependent on your system. It's not entirely sure what makes it better in some systems and worse in others. I would say turn this off, test it, turn this on, test it, and see what the results you get are. For the camera shake strength over in display, I just want to go over this real quick. I set this to weak. If you set it too high, then it can really mess up your game and just cause you to have really bad aim. Render scale set to ultra quality. If you're having really bad issues, I would honestly set this at balanced or performance. It won't make the game look great, but it will improve your game performance drastically. So I highly recommend changing that. Just for a final test, I'm going to be going into a level 9 mission, and we're going to be showing you exactly the performance difference. That's the one thing that I find kind of annoying about benchmarking results, is that they're always tested on light maps, easy maps, where there's not a whole lot of like rain, for example, and it's usually on level 1 or level 2 difficulty. So I'm going to show you what this looks like on a potentially difficult map to load. I noticed that I get the worst performance on bugs, so I'm going to be going over, this is the closest thing we have to a jungle map, the Jaakeup planet, and I'm just going to load up any map, and I have the light armor, scout armor, just so I can kind of sit in the bushes and kind of roam around a little bit freely. Okay, that's terrible actually. No, this is a good test of the smoke, and I'm grabbing everything that would cause a lower frame rate just to do some ultra testing. All right, so here I am loading in. I got that frame stutter here, and I'm getting about 45 frames per second. The rain looks kind of terrible, I will admit that. Oh, I'm not even on ultra quality. Hang on, there we go. I'm on ultra quality, and you can see I'm still getting about 45 to 47 frames. Now, the best part about this is lossless scaling. If I hit Shift F2 to turn that on, that improves my frame rate immediately, just like that. 30 times the frames. I'm still inputting my game at 45 frames, 45 to 50. So, if you ever feel like your mouse is lagging behind, or maybe your clicks are lagging behind, you're still playing at 30 frames. You're just seeing higher frames. So just keep that in mind every time you do this. I'm going to call it a barrage, because this is usually where performance is hugely impacted, is barrage missiles. There you go. You can see that just dropped to about 20 to 30. And yeah, this is the extreme version. This is what those benchmark results channels usually kind of avoid talking about. Level 1, level 2, anybody could run at 100 frames, but getting to level 9 and actually trying to get into the thick of battle, this is where the computers will start to struggle and the graphics will start to struggle. So real quick, I'm going to try to open up Task Manager here real quick. So here we can see on my Task Manager that I have about, well, it was even. I'm trying to, ideally what I want to do when you're looking at your Task Manager, you're trying to get the CPU and GPU percentage is about equal. And you can see here that I'm getting about 59% GPU, about 40%, or sorry, other way around. 59% CPU, 40% GPU. That is the issue with this game, is that it does use more CPU than GPU. So you do have to put in a little bit extra work to make sure that your graphics performance, your GPU is like keeping up with it and like kind of equaling it out. There it goes, 65 to 45. That's about as much that I want. If I want, I could move it up to native, but I am already experiencing performance issues, so this is what I do whenever I'm recording to get an ideal frame rate, and this is also something that isn't talked about much in the benchmark results. So this is what I do, and yeah, there we go. About 60 to 50%, about the same. Rain is clearing up. And yeah, like I said, if you're ever having issues with extreme performance issues, set the render scale under display all the way down to performance. I don't know how I did that. And you'll notice a pretty big improvement. And again, this is still probably the most poorly optimized map in the game. So don't be afraid if like you're getting bad performance on this map. There are other maps where they play way different and way better, so I highly recommend, honestly, if you're having issues with performance, maybe just completely avoid these maps entirely. I know that's what I'm kind of doing personally, just because I don't like how these maps are played or how these maps run. I also personally, I almost entirely avoid terminated missions entirely. I did play a little bit with my friends today, just because like we're, you know, it's just casual fun with friends. But if I were to like play solo or something, I would probably be avoiding this map entirely. But other than that, that is about it. I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure to leave any likes or any any questions down below if you have any. I'll try to answer as many as I can. I will also link the Discord as well as the other video for the Helldivers optimization performance guide, because it's still a good video. He doesn't test it in level 9, but it's still a really great video for setting everything up. And I'll leave a link for that down below. And I'll also leave a link for the Discord, for Helldivers 2 Discord. They have a troubleshooting channel in there that has a bunch of pinned messages that will show exactly like everything that you should do to try to get better frames. And they also have a pretty active community helping each other out. And I'll also link a mod down below. It's not really a mod, it's like a user config file that someone made on Nexus Mods for getting like the ultimate performance boost as possible in this game. It'll set your graphics down to ultra low, so you'll have to do some fiddling with it to get your resolution correct, but it's super easy to install. And if you need help with that, I'll also quickly describe that in the description or in a comment. And other than that, I think that is about it. Yeah. And other than that, if you're interested in 3D prints, check out my Etsy shop, JK 3D Productions. I sell cool little keychains like this or other keychains that might be intriguing to you. But I hope you have a good rest of your day. Make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next Helldivers video. Peace.